right, should we get started?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Just so we go to the next slide, I wanted to thank the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Forest Service for the support for this cafe series and the JEDI roadmap work that we've undertaken over the last year and a half. Because trees are important to equity as well as human health, they have funded these workshops and the training so that we can continue to improve work within our communities and our natural areas. If you'd like to host a cafe in the future, please feel free to contact me. We will work with you to develop the topic and to promote it on our social media and through our newsletter so that we can all come together and discuss any issues of common concern or things that you want to share or spotlight about the work that you're doing across the region with your partners. And with that, I want to turn it over to Dani Abboud from Brushwood Center and Raquel Garcia-Alvarez from Forest Preserves of Cook County.
Hi, buenas tardes, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Chicago Wilderness JEDI Roadmap, where we will be sharing with you our goals, strategies, and give you a glimpse of our first year timeline and share with you our JEDI journey. For those who may not know me, my name is Raquel Garcia-Alvarez. My pronouns are she, hers, ella. My nickname is also Rocky, so feel free to call me Rocky. I am the Policy and Sustainability Manager at the Forest Preserves of Cook County, and I'm also part of the Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee we have for the past 3 years. And I lead stewardship days for the Latine community at Possum Hollow Woods. And my why for joining JEDI and being part of this journey is that I'm really passionate about connecting people to nature and revitalizing those cultural connections that we have with nature. As we know, sometimes people may not have access to open space, and so those cultural connections may be lost, or we think that nature is outside of us, and we forget that we are a part of nature and that nature helps to shape our culture. And I am joined today with my co-chair, Dani.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dani Abboud. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I am the Director of Community Programs and Partnerships for Brushwood Center at Ryerson Woods, which is a very long and fancy way of saying that my job is building out community partnerships and long-term relationships with different organizations, mostly in the Lake County area where we serve, with the interest of working together to overcome barriers people face in accessing both nature and the arts, and ultimately wellness, because we know spending time outside as well as expressing ourselves creatively can have profound impacts on our health and well-being. It's an amazing job and position, and I'm really privileged, I'd say, to get to have a career that allows me to build relationships with people professionally and also collaborate on ways we can find solutions to the inequities that we face that Raquel alluded to. I also, in addition to being the co-chair of this initiative with Rocky, I am co-chair of the Initiative 5, Increasing Equitable Access to Nature group for the Alliance. And I'm also on the leadership group for Out in Nature, which is a group that coordinates queer nature outings for folks around the Chicagoland region. If you haven't checked us out, you should follow us on Instagram. But with all of that said, I'm incredibly passionate about increasing equitable access to the environment, especially empowering our young people, our next generation, to find their voices and their passions through nature excursions and artistic endeavors. I'm very passionate about intersectional environmentalism, again, making sure that everybody has access to the land that we share, and systems change. And I think that's part of my why of joining this group. I've come to Chicago Wilderness programs for the last few years since being in my position at Brushwood Center, and I see so much potential in these kinds of networks and alliances. It's just a matter of activating these connections and finding ways that we can be really strong resource hubs and be connected and on the same page so that we can respond meaningfully to the crises that we see occurring in the climate reality of our world. So super excited to dive into some of our ideas with you a bit more.
Thank you, Dani. So why is Chicago Wilderness Alliance engaging in this JEDI work? And why JEDI? You know, there's so many acronyms out there. You know, JEDI is Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, but the Forest Preserves is working on READY, you know, Racial Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. Some of our partners are working on DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and others are starting off with accessibility and rebranding, and there's all of these words out there, and we just want you to know that whatever acronym you're choosing within your organization or within the path, we're all on this journey together to make nature more equitable and to improve access, because we know that nature underpins our health and well-being, and there are so many more benefits to having access to nature and being out there and recreating. But in order for us to move that work forward, we have to acknowledge that not everyone has had equal access to nature's benefits. Green spaces are not equitably distributed nor equally accessible. For instance, the Forest Preserves of Cook County, the majority of our land holdings are within suburban Cook County and not Chicago City proper. We are committed to addressing historical inequities and increasing access to nature for people in the Chicago Wilderness Alliance region, within our 4 state collar counties, in our collar counties, and we recognize that certain populations have been historically excluded from its benefits, because while nature sees no color, people have seen color, and sometimes people have felt unwelcomed in our natural areas or do not feel safe. You know, and the Alliance is committed to providing resources and strategies to further address this important work. And we thank you for being part of this conversation, because the Alliance is only as strong as its membership and people to move the work forward within the network. So we're really pleased that you're here to learn more about how you can be part of the JEDI roadmap and move this initiative forward. Next slide. So this workshop is going to be very interactive. So we're going to start off with a breakout group of us sharing what is your why. You know, what made you want to join this cafe or to get involved in the JEDI roadmap group. So we're going to be splitting you up into groups of 2 or 3. Next slide. 2 or 3. So when you are within your group, please introduce yourself. You can give your name, your pronouns, the organization that you work for, and talk about your why. As we mentioned, you know, or as I mentioned, my why is because I am really passionate about connecting people with nature and revitalizing cultural connections. And you could, so just make it short and sweet, because we have many people on the call. So we're going to go ahead and split up into those groups.
Laura.
Rooms will be open. You should.
Group, it can be feel a little like, oh, where am I going? So I'm going to call on someone just to briefly share, you know, anything that was discussed in the group. I'm going to call on Vera. Hi, Vera.
Hi, Raquel. It's great to see you. So our group, there were 3 of us, but one of us was in kind of a loud space, so was just typing things into the chat. But we talked about, I'm part of the Wetlands Initiative, which is focused on habitat restoration. And then, oh, I'm looking for her face here. And then the other person in our group was part of a Wild Ones chapter. And they talked about community gardening spaces and, you know, bringing native plants to areas. And we talked about how there's many different areas that we work in the environmental field, and how we want to keep learning and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate, to make sure that we're kind of bringing everyone along, and sometimes there's folks that don't understand why it's necessary, but because they don't realize how some haven't historically been included or haven't felt included. So we just talked about how whichever way we're approaching our work in the environmental field, whatever arena we're in, there's ways that we can make sure everyone has access and can participate in our programs.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Vera. Very well said. Thank you. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And, even though we're talking about JEDI, we want to remind everyone that Chicago Wilderness Alliance and many of our members have been doing this work. And, we had established a Goal 5 initiative to increase equitable access to nature. And within that goal, we prioritize, increasing access to natural areas, as well as green and blue spaces of all types that are welcoming to all, right? We can't forget those blue spaces of, the rivers and Lake Michigan right beside us, to expand nature-based programming across the region, particularly in places with the least area of healthy green space as of 2020. And then to directly address the region's legacy of environmental injustice. And I realize that that's really difficult to have those conversations, and like, as Vera said, some people may not understand, or, as I said, like, nature sees no color, but people do. And that is something that the Black, Indigenous, people of color community have asked us to really acknowledge and embrace, that they have been historically excluded. When the forest preserves started saying that and embracing that, we were able to have those honest conversations with the BIPOC communities that we were so desperately trying to engage, right? Because they were being told the woods aren't safe for you, while others were like going on, hiking trips, and, everywhere they went, people looked like them. So we need to acknowledge those disparities, so that way we can continue to heal and have those conversations, and continue to really invite those people in. Next slide. So with this project overview, with the JEDI project, this is phase 3 of it. We've been working with Cream City Conservation. As you may remember, phase 1 was the cultural assessment survey that many organizations took, where individual staffers from each organization fill out the survey, and they were, again, very honest, because it was an anonymous survey of, how they felt, how they felt if they were doing a good job engaging those communities. Was their workplace being inclusive? Did they feel that they were being paid well? So all of that was done in that first phase. The second phase was to do some trainings with Cream City Conservation, and many of you attended those trainings, where August Baugh talked about how to increase DEI in your workplace. And we've been working very hard with this roadmap, and have had six strategy sessions with August Baugh to figure out where is the energy that the Alliance has and wants to move forward within JEDI. And we also created a list of volunteers and some preliminary feedback to inform our next steps, which are to refine the organizational work plan into SMARTY goals. And SMARTY stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, relevant, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And to create Chicago Wilderness Cafes such as this one to meet the goals. I'm going to pass it over to Dani, who's going to help to give you, to continue to share those different goals that we have.
Thanks, Raquel. So as Rocky was saying, we spent this time trying to put together a bit of a roadmap to kind of guide our way forward. And as we also said, this is not new. We've had this energy and these conversations around DEI for years, to be honest. But what the roadmap's really looking at is how do we go from these continual conversations into action? And we know that a lot of other organizations within the Alliance are kind of in a similar place where you feel a little bit stuck in some ways. You know, we've had these conversations, we've been to trainings, we know more or less what we're supposed to do, but the actual doing is kind of what we're trying to assess right now and see where we're at, and also find ways that we can take this roadmap we've put together and not have it be a separate initiative, not just have the JEDI roadmap group be a new thing out of CW, but really have it be incorporated and kind of the foundation for all of the working groups within the Alliance, so that every group is rooted in these principles of equity and inclusion, because that's what it takes to have a structure that is rooted in JEDI, is to have it at every level, not just one committee that works on it somewhere else, but that it's ingrained and incorporated across all levels. And so this roadmap has been broken down into 3 main goals, the first of which is engagement. And the reasoning behind this is that we know that the Alliance membership is not accurately representing the broad diversity of our region, both organizationally and individually. And the fact that, I mean, our region is huge. It spans Chicago, the Chicagoland area, all of Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Southwest Michigan. And we know that we have a lot of representation from the Chicagoland area, but we're not necessarily getting all of the folks geographically. We also know demographically, we're not representing the full diversity of our region. So there's a lot of ways that we could be increasing our engagement to fully represent the incredible natural areas we're talking about in our region. And we want to reach more organizations who may not traditionally identify as a conservation or nature-focused organization, but they're working in the realm of the social determinants of health, right? The things that dictate our well-being as people and as an ecosystem. So public health, transportation, housing, all of these issues have intersection into conservation work, whether we're all aware of it at all times or not. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting intersectionally with other organizations who are leaders in this work, so that we can carry out our conservation and nature-focused initiatives as equitably and inclusive as possible, right? Because if we want to build, say, a new park, right, which is a great goal, but if we put a park in a community without doing community engagement and talking with folks about housing and access, right, we could end up gentrifying a neighborhood. And so that's where this lack of intersectionality gets us into really harmful situations. And we don't want to further harm. We want to be creating spaces that are useful and accessible to everyone. So in terms of engagement, we have a couple strategies we're looking, and again, this is just, this plan just covers the first year of this initiative. This will obviously be a very long and iterative process that'll get reassessed and reevaluated as we go. But our high priority items that we wanted to address in our first year is first to create an effective practices guideline. This would be a document to help our membership kind of see what other folks are doing in ways that they are having great success in community engagement, and have it as a learning model for people to utilize. So again, as an alliance, we're not trying to create a new program or initiative all on our own. We're really trying to serve as a resource and do kind of the internal assessment of where are our members at, our partner organizations, and who's leading this work, and what are they doing that's successful, and how can we connect people who are new to this work or are looking for the next steps to that leadership and to those initiatives. And to that end, we're also looking to reintroduce the Alliance with this renewed perspective and initiative to past, present, and future partners, again, to try and engage more of these diverse organizations from different fields, and to get folks who used to be more involved to come back to the table. We're also going to be prioritizing to a lesser, things that say high priority versus low priority. They're all a priority, but some things have to happen, and you have to have certain foundations in place to do the next step, right? And so we also want to focus on individual engagement with more people, getting folks involved from different organizations in different ways, having people come to more cafes or take more leadership initiative in different ways, as well as re-engaging organizations and getting more organizations to participate. The second goal of the 3 is accessibility. Again, we recognize that there are a lot of resources within our alliance, but not everyone is aware of them or able to access or plug into those resources. And there's a lot of barriers that keep people from accessing green space or, you know, nature programming, our different various member organizations. And those barriers can include language, and whether that's people needing a language other than English or requiring ASL interpretation, needing live transcripts or programs, not being able to parse through like heavy science jargon that some organizations may put out. Also, a major barrier to accessing green space, of course, is transportation. technology, capacity in terms of people engaging within the membership. We know there's a lot of different barriers at different levels. And so to the end of accessibility, the first thing we want to do is really identify the internal barriers we're seeing within our membership to increasing accessibility. And we're doing that through what we're calling our JEDI partner audit, which I'll be talking about more in depth shortly. But the goal of this audit is to do really an internal inventory of our different member organizations and see where everybody's at with their personal JEDI journeys and what kind of accessibility features do we have in our org? What organizations have accessible programs, accessible sites within our network? How can we map out next steps without really doing that internal work first, right? So we have to take stock really of our partnerships and our partner organizations, and then start to amplify different resources and tools and trainings for folks based on the different assets and barriers we're seeing. Some folks might have a lot of multilingual resources for programs. Some folks may be just getting started and trying to provide, Spanish translations for some of the communities they serve. So being able to help build those bridges and connections between leaders and folks who are starting out and help amplify the different resources and tools that we have available in our alliance. We also want to adopt a land acknowledgement statement formally for Chicago Wilderness Alliance. We don't currently have one as an alliance itself, so many of our various member organizations have their own, which again, we could just pull together a statement based on different members, but we want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that's incredibly intentional and that our statement comes with accompanying actions. We don't just want to have an land acknowledgement statement to check off a box, but we want to make sure that we're honoring Indigenous communities and finding ways to meaningfully engage with Indigenous partners in the region. Additionally, we want to adopt an accessibility statement and again, accompanying actions that back up that statement. It's very easy with DEI work or JEDI work to put out the jargon and use the right words and post things on platforms, right? We've all seen it in the last couple of years, but we want to make sure that we're going beyond words, right? The whole idea of this process is to go from conversation into action. And so we want to make sure that any statements or policies that we put out are backed by actions where we can really prove our commitment to these different values that we're putting forward and show the ways that we're working towards those values as an alliance. And our third goal area is advocacy and awareness. So as many of you, again, we have so many resources in this alliance, and as many of you know, there's lots of great opportunities to put out different messages through CW, but not everybody in our group is connecting to the resources we have or this alliance network, again, because of the barriers I mentioned earlier and a lack of effective communication in many ways. And groups who may be interested in joining the alliance might not be aware of the different groups and resources and support that are available, right? So it's not just advocacy for the issues that we care about, so that's certainly part of it. It's also building awareness of the membership and the work that's being done. There's so many incredible efforts and initiatives within our partners, and we want to make sure that we're highlighting all the good work and again, building up these leadership models and being able to shed light on all of the incredible work that we see happening. And so to that end, the advocacy action plan includes creating JEDI policy and advocacy statement guidelines. So really, this is about creating a framework for us to say what we stand for as an alliance and be able to point to that as different issues come up in our region, and know how we can respond meaningfully and thoughtfully to the various crises we'll see as we continue to live in a climate change reality. And also knowing, again, like Raquel mentioned, we live in a nexus of a lot of environmental justice communities, and knowing we want to make sure that different organizations know what they can turn to us for and what we can provide in terms of advocacy and policy guidelines. So the other piece of that too is improving our JEDI education and resource sharing. So again, we have all these resources, we have these sessions we've done, we have all these shared learnings, but we know that there's probably a better way we could be compiling that information and providing it for our members and external organizations. So I'm really curious to hear people's thoughts on that, which will be part of our later breakout session, really kind of thinking through the resources and information people are looking for and the best way to house and receive those resources. And again, the third piece is raising awareness of this ongoing work that we know is happening within the Alliance. It doesn't always get its flowers and its deserved praise. So trying to give it more of an externalized face to the Alliance, who we are, what our members are doing, and why people should join and engage with us and expand this really powerful network and help us continue doing this work further. So that was a lot. Feel free, as I'm discussing too, to post comments in the chat, questions in the chat. We can get to them a little bit later. But the piece I want to introduce to you first is this audit I mentioned. So we have all these different outlined goals and strategies that we've worked on over the last few months. And as I said, the real starting point for us is to do an inventory, to say, we know there's great things happening within our alliance. We know there are organizations who have come to all of these trainings, have come to sessions, have been in other meetings. But we want to know who's moving from conversation into action, and what are those actions, and how's it going for them, and how can we use those examples as a model for other organizations who may be newer to the work or struggling in that work, or struggling from getting to that place of conversation to action when it comes to equity and inclusion practices. And so we've created this audit that's an online survey. It's different from our initial cultural assessment that Raquel mentioned that went out as phase 1 of the JEDI initiative. The cultural assessment was really looking more at workplace culture. So how do individual staff members within their organization feel? How do they feel supported by their organization? If they're not supported, what are the ways they're feeling unsupported, et cetera. Whereas the goal of this audit is really just to do an internal inventory of the assets and needs relating to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work within our current membership. So again, who's leading this work? Who needs to be connected to leaders? And we only want one submission per organization for this survey. The cultural assessment, we wanted as many people as possible to take it, but for this, we're just trying to look at each partner organization of the Alliance as one collective. It's not asking specific questions about personal experience, but it's looking at both the structural level and programmatic level as it pertains to equity and inclusion initiatives. So at the structural level, that includes internal board and staff structure, funding, policies, required trainings, and programmatically, again, that's your public-facing practices. So those barriers I mentioned earlier in terms of transportation, language, how is your organization addressing those in terms of public-facing programs, the accessibility of materials and sites. And again, this is, I keep saying and again, this is to help us assess the resources, the assets we have as an alliance, and find ways to better connect our membership to those resources and assets. And I want to quickly identify too that this audit, while it's kind of a first step, isn't really fully under exclusively one of the 3 goals I introduced. It kind of touches all 3 goal areas, right? In terms of engagement, we're trying to help assess who in our alliance is engaging with this work in a meaningful way and who needs to be connected with those organizations. In terms of accessibility, we're looking at what places and organizations are accessible within our region, and how can we create a useful hub of resources that further that accessibility across new organizations. In terms of advocacy, we're looking at what policies we need to support and uplift these different initiatives and work across the Alliance. And how do we better advocate for and amplify leaders in this work as a network, as an Alliance? You know, what can we be doing to put forward, or what can we put forward as a group to help foster more of these initiatives and help foster this work further? And so if you have questions, again, feel free to pop them in the chat. Going to take a quick look at how we're doing in time. Pretty good. And I wanted to also give everyone kind of a brief overview of that survey. The audit, we put the SurveyMonkey link in the chat, but I want to show you it without you having to like fully fill it out just yet. One second while I organize my screen, sorry. So as I said, I have it here and in bold and big letters. We only want one submission per organization. And we have some shared definitions at the top. So as Raquel outlined, JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. When we think about equity, we're thinking about the idea that all individuals have the tools they need to engage, participate, and succeed. So an equity lens considers a multifaceted approach that is tailored to individual needs, whereas you might have noticed there's a shift in the discourse away from the word equality. Equality is the idea that everybody gets the same thing, but we know that that doesn't create an equitable society because people need different things. So equity is really thinking about the individual and what people need to thrive and survive based on their circumstances and situations, and meeting those needs responsibly. And so this survey or audit starts looking at structural levels. So, getting our basic info from folks, name, organization. We ask a bit about people's budget and if they're setting aside any of their budget for equity and inclusion initiatives. None of these questions are meant to make you feel bad as an organization. It's not meant to make you feel guilty for not doing these things. It's really just a question of who's doing it, and if so, how's it going? And if it's something you're not doing, we hope it spurs a conversation within your organization about why you're not doing it, and if it's something you could be accomplishing. I think it's kind of timely that we're launching this at the end of the year. It's like annual review time. So really, I encourage people to think of it as like an annual review for your organization in terms of JEDI initiatives. It's meant to be a tool for us as an alliance to see where we're at, but I hope it's also a tool for people to internally assess and evaluate their next steps in their JEDI journeys as well. So we ask questions about public-facing JEDI statements or policies, if anybody has one formally adopted. We look at if people have JEDI plans or measures in place and performance goals and how they meet those. I'm not going to go through each of these questions individually because that will take forever, but we also, I want to point out, have space at the end of each section to attach any files. So if your organization has policies or procedural references that you think would be useful or you'd be willing to share, we ask people to include those, as well as a space to add links for any other resources that you found helpful that you think we should be pointing people towards. And then the second half, again, focuses in on those programmatic components. So, who is your organization engaging? Who is your predominant audience, your predominant geographic region? We ask about ADA accessibility. We also are thinking about, is your organization providing certain materials in different languages or in accessible ways? Are you giving people heads up on the different kinds of terrain they might encounter at your site, or sensory expectations? A lot of these are things that are now just coming into conversation about how to create accessible programming, but we were curious to see who in our region is doing it and who would like to be connected to more information. And at the end, again, we have space to provide any resources or materials that you're willing to share. So that's kind of a bird's eye view overview of this audit and what we're looking to do with it. I'm really excited to get to start parsing through that data a bit and get a sense of, like I said, who's really making strides in this work, who can we look to as a model and a leader, and how can we connect people who are interested to those resources. And so I think we have a second if we want to do any quick questions, and then we're going to go into another round of breakouts. I guess I won't share if we're going to do some questions. But if anyone has a question, they want to drop it in the chat or come off mute really quick, we can take one or two.
And you can raise your hand too, and I can call on you. Okay. Great. Are we ready for the breakout then? Oh, I see.
I think we
Jane.
got one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's going to be different for each organization. We encourage folks to think internally about what structure makes, or what person makes most sense within your organization to fill this out. It might be a team of people. Maybe it's part of a staff meeting or a leadership call. I know personally for Brushwood Center, it would probably be a collaborative effort between myself and our executive director and maybe another program person. But I think it's important that it's something that's taken, it's obviously a little longer, so it's going to take some time, but I'd like people to be really intentional with it. And again, I think the timing of it is nice for an annual review. So if it's part of like a workshop or kind of strategizing session for your organization, I think it could be a really useful tool to help frame maybe goals for next year or help identify some areas for growth. But yeah, I would suggest, someone in leadership and maybe a combination of folks taking it together who have the knowledge of the structural side of these issues, as well as the more public-facing programmatic side. And someone else asked when this should be completed by. We don't have a hard date, I don't think yet, but I would say our goal is probably early 2023, maybe. I'm seeing some nods from Raquel and Laura. We'll think on that if we have a hard due date. You can I can drop a PDF copy of this in the chat as well, and we can share it out over email. So people have that.
Brianna just asked for that. So that's actually a great idea. And I can send that out we can do an e-blast announcement that includes that as well, and maybe give some more background.
Perfect.
Also, if people.
Lorena?
Hi, Dani. How are you guys? I have a quick question. I work with Mark Johnson, and I know that under CW, maybe this is a question for Laura as well, as you're thinking about this inventory of the different organizations and resources and assets. I know Mark J has been working on a Chicago Wilderness Hub where there's information around stewardship and different maps. Will that be layered into it? And how do we make sure, because this is one group, but there's a larger group on CW, and how it's layered into that, into those maps as well. And also, I guess my second question is, how do you, as I'm thinking about asset-based stuff, some of us want to share, but then, you know, we also want to be sensitive of our partners and the different places that we work in, because sometimes if we put things out there and the partner didn't agree to it, you know, these ethical things. And how do we, I know, because we've done this before with, you know, redefining stewardship. I've done this with where we take inventory of things. And so assuring one another that we're, you know, respectful of our partners. And then also a lot of the ones that carry these partnerships are people like me who are community organizers. And when we, you know, when we share and report out to bigger institutions, it's a delicate balance. And I hope this makes all sense, but yeah, everything from like, how do we make sure it goes into the larger picture of CW to how to ethically work to make sure that our partnerships and where we work and how we work are respected, and as well as like, you know, how it's going to be shared out at large.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. And I have, I was going to show this a little bit later, but I think it makes sense to share now kind of an idea of a slide kind of explaining what we're thinking of in terms of next steps or what we do with this audit information. And we definitely don't want people to feel pressured to share anything that's not, you know, that hasn't been approved or that might have like partners ownership over it as well. It's more about sharing personal resources that your organization has developed. For example, if you have like an internal policy around equity and inclusion, adding that. If you have like a commitment that board members have to agree to, or staff. And likewise with public facing programs, I know, for example, the Cook County Forest Preserve has a language policy guide that they've created to explain why they have things in different languages. That would be an example of a resource we'd ask folks to share, not so much things that may have been developed like programmatically in partnership with other organizations. And additionally, it's completely optional. So if people don't like just want to tell us they have these things and say we can't share it, that's okay too, but it helps us know that, you know, you have these different collaborative resources, and maybe we can follow up with you and talk a bit more about like how you created that. If you have any best practices or thoughts to share that we could create that could be public facing, that wouldn't violate kind of that sanctity of trust you've created with that partner. And in terms of connecting to the larger work, absolutely, we want this to be part of the resource hub or the data hub. And we'll be connecting with different goal initiative leads going forward to see how we can make sure that their findings from this are integrated across the work that CW is doing. But moving forward, we're kind of envisioning this as like the three goals, kind of how we meet this through the survey or through the audit. The first is that we're going to be looking for kind of a team of audit ambassadors, fun little alliteration, to help us get folks to understand and take the survey. Obviously, this has been helpful that I've explained it to all of you. If you just looked at the PDF, you might be like, what is Dani doing? They sent me this super long survey and I don't understand why. So we're looking for folks to help us kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, evangelize this audit and encourage people to take it and kind of explain it a little bit. We're also looking for folks who'd be willing to help us kind of comb through responses and pull out themes and find those connections I keep alluding to of the people who are leading and the people who need to be connected to leaders. And then we're also going to be looking for folks to help lead as policy guides to create this guidelines and framework that'll help us guide our JEDI policies and guide our JEDI actions forward as an alliance based on the responses we get in this audit, right? So looking at that data, seeing those themes, where's the need, where are the resources, what can we as an alliance do, knowing that we're not, you know, an organization that does its own programs or does its own thing outside of having these kinds of cafes and networking events. but what resources can we provide? How can we best utilize our platform, and how can we kind of codify this work into our alliance moving forward? And so if you're interested in becoming more involved with any of these efforts, and again, it might be some of the same people that come through on each of these, and that's totally great. Please let us know. You can either self-identify in the chat, or you can contact myself or Raquel, and we'd be happy to connect with you and talk about moving forward. We're not asking for a ton of time in terms of people's, in terms of time commitment. You know, a lot of these tasks could be done, you know, separately, and we communicate over email and share our findings. So we can really meet people where they're at in terms of time commitments. But we would love to get more people's input and assistance on this to make sure we're really fully representing and getting as many perspectives from the Alliance as possible as we move forward with this work.
And I also just want to add that, you know, Lorena, kind of what I heard you saying, and what I'm thinking about is, you know, sometimes we as big institutions have also been guilty of like putting our name on things that were done in collaboration with BIPOC communities or smaller organizations. And I think, and that's one of the reasons why they don't join our alliance, right? And we have to also be honest about that as well. And it's not like a personal criticism, it's just a reflection that we should internalize so that way we can do better, because we're missing out on these adjacent organizations that maybe focus on like civic service and trying to improve their communities, and they're also trying to increase nature access, but they don't have that trust with us because we broke it, right? You know, so I thank you for bringing that up, because that is something that we should also be acknowledging.
Thank you both.
Absolutely. Someone suggested in the chat too that we put that in writing, and I think that would be that's a great idea. Raquel and I can definitely work on that, and having kind of an agreement set forward just so people know our intentions with this information, and you know, just to be as transparent as possible about how we plan to disseminate and share out any of the shared resources, and ensuring that we're always crediting people for their work and not trying to say that the Alliance put together this amazing resource, because again, what is the Alliance without the members? It's literally nothing. The Alliance is all of us as a collective working together, right? So amazing. We're going to take some time now to go into some breakout groups. So the way this is going to work, we're going to have 3 big breakout sections focused on the different goals that I outlined. So one for engagement, one for accessibility, and one for advocacy and awareness. We're going to let people self-select what group they'd like to go into, but we're going to take some time to just kind of think about these different pieces. If there's a piece that your organization or that you know you're personally really passionate about and would like to discuss more, join that group. The goal of this time is to really get your feedback on what we presented on this roadmap, talk a little bit more in depth about some of those strategies that I outlined, and to answer questions. And so if folks want to do that, I think Laura will be opening up the 3 breakout rooms, and you can kind of self-select. We'll have moderators in each one. Raquel will be with the advocacy group. I'll be in accessibility, and then Leslie will be with engagement.
And if you can't get to the room, I can help direct you to the room that you're interested in.
Yeah, and we'll have about 25, 30 minutes to chat, and we'll have we also have a Jamboard that we'll be using to capture ideas. So if you can't stay for that, but you'd still like to share some thoughts, I will pop that in the chat now so everybody has it. But we'd love your thoughts and feedback. Look forward to our breakout conversations. Wow. Thanks everyone for attending and participating. We have a few minutes. I don't know if maybe Raquel and Leslie, if we all want to just share a couple maybe even just like your overall feeling after your breakout group. I would say I'm super energized. We had a lot of really great ideas and conversation around what accessibility means, what's a meaningful way that we could represent resources that we get out of the audit, and how we can kind of visualize some of these things in a way that's useful for our partners and our other outside organizations. So I'm super excited. I'm super grateful and excited.
So I can go over some of what we spend a bit of time talking about different avenues of communicating with potentially new partners as well as old partners. And a lot of it came down to being available, coming to those partners. So to talk to them about the audit, let them know what it is. And also has the carrot, let them know they also, and explain it obviously, but that they get the, they'll get a report afterwards. When we were talking about how to engage with new partners for CWA, it can going again to where those people are, where they meet, possibly, and having the opportunity to talk about the audit, but also what is CWA and what type of resources can we provide them to help them move their mission along. And then we also, somebody brought up, and I don't remember who was, a speakers bureau, that we could have a speakers bureau who then could go out, you know, being over here in Indiana, maybe, you know, they come over and talk about, I don't know, climate change, right? They can, because we have a group for climate change, they come over and do climate change, but then they also, or somebody does, and then, but then we also go over the other materials that we have that could help them. We can network them with the right people, hopefully, and then also the audit as well. So there's a lot of bang in there, hopefully for that, you know, that buck, as we used to say. Maybe it's $10 now. So, so I think, you know, does anybody from our group want to say anything? We took a lot of yellow Post-it notes on that one.
Amazing. Raquel.
Yeah, we named some resources. We had a good conversation. Some are, you know, Brookfield Zoo has done a lot of work on disability services and accessibility. You know, as I put in the chat, Roots and Routes, you know, is they, from the Field Museum, they created a best practices handbook on how to create gathering spaces. So again, that link is in the chat. You know, the Forest Preserves of Cook County, we have done a couple of position papers and strategic planning. And I also see from the chat that there's a question about that. And, you know, we are going to be finalizing our ready strategic plan in the next month or so, and we'll be able to share it out with individuals who are interested, because the position papers are really broad goals, and then the strategic plan is broken down into those priorities that will help us to reach those goals.
Awesome. Guys, it sounds like we have a lot of great feedback and things to go off of. So I'm just gonna, to close us out, remind you kind of what we're thinking of in the next steps forward with the audit. If you're interested at all in helping us carry out any of these, please feel free to either shout it out in the chat or reach out to myself or Raquel. We're happy to talk more about it and happy to work with people on their availability and time schedules. But if you're down to help us get folks to take this, help us review some of the responses and fill out themes, help us create some of these policy advocacy guidelines that we're talking about, and that Raquel's kind of building already through her work with the REDI network, please let us know. We'd love more people's input and help. And also, it's just more sustainable if we have more people working on it. And it also more accurately reflects the, again, the diversity of our alliance, our regions. So thank you all again for joining us. We'll just want to do another thank you to the IDNR for helping to support this work, and the U.S. Forest Service and funding these workshops and trainings that have been so crucial to this roadmap process. And thank you all for coming and sharing time with us and giving us your thoughts and feedback. This was super valuable. We're super excited to take back these sticky notes and see what we can continue to build off of. I think that's all I got.
Nice job. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye.